I want to show you how you can build an agent within Microsoft Copilot Studio that can access Excel data and reason over it to help provide any sort of insights that you need, all in this video right now. So I actually had the chance where somebody reached out to me to help them solve this exact problem. And in all honesty, it's not as simple as you would think, because let me go ahead and share this here. So here's an example. I've gone ahead and just started building out a proof of concept agent. So I'm not following the best practices here. I don't have instructions or super thorough pieces in here, but I want to go ahead and show you why it might not be as simple as we think. So I've actually gone ahead and I have an Excel sheet, and we're going to use this Excel sheet. And the use case was every week, this business gets sent an Excel sheet that may look something like this, that generally has some level of sales insights around which people sold which products to which accounts for how much money, right? And so they'd be able to reason over maybe the why things were won, why things were lost, which sales team members need help and coaching. If I go ahead and just add this document to our knowledge source, which would be the most intuitive thought, right? If I add that, I can go ahead and come over here and see, I can ask, what was the highest sales team member revenue last week? And if you see in the test pane, let me actually flip my camera to the other side. If you see in the test pane, it's saying, hey, do you want me to look at this weekly sales insights Excel? And I said, yes. And it returns back and says, hey, I can't actually look at this information, but you should go ahead and look in there because I'm sure it has the right information. That's ultimately what it's saying here. But that's not what we want. That's not the experience that we want. We want our agent to actually be able to look at that information and provide insight. So that is the scenario. That is what I'm hoping to show you today, because there are a couple of different ways that we could work around this. So the first one, and it could potentially be the easiest depending on your use case, is using an agent flow. And really, there's multiple different things we could do with an agent flow. The easiest part of extracting this information is if there is a way for you to be storing this information in a CSV file as opposed to an Excel file. If that's possible, I recognize that might not be possible for everybody, but if that's possible, that information that you can pull out is going to be really easy for Copilot to reason over, because it's essentially just going to be text and commas. And so it's going to be able to reason over that information. But if you're in a scenario like this person was, that we were talking and discussing how we could solve this, where that's not necessarily possible, here is how we can achieve this. What I'm going to go ahead and do is we are going to set up an agent flow to handle going and accessing the content of this Excel file, then reasoning over it and providing that output back to us. And so here I have my Excel analyst. If I go to tools, I've actually already kind of created a very rudimentary, we'll build out this agent flow as a part of this video, but kind of built a placeholder for us here. Here we have a get insights from Excel agent flow. Oh my goodness, I don't know why that was so hard for me to say. Now let's go ahead and click into this. Let's go ahead and build out the flow that we need. So right now, all I have is this, okay? What I'm saying is, hey, I'm gonna pass you instructions, but then what I want you to do is I want you to go look at this Excel file, which we are storing in SharePoint, pull out that content, now reason over it based off of the instructions that are provided, and then provide us that AI generated response based off of our instructions. The first action we're gonna need is a list rows present in a table. And you're looking for this Excel online. And now what this is gonna do, this is going to allow you to point at the very specific Excel document that you want to point to in SharePoint. Now, one important caveat that I did test prior to this video is how it's gonna find that file is based off of the name of the file. It's not necessarily gonna be some kind of unique ID or identifier of that document. So say this document is technically a new document every week, like this person's example, we really just can find it based off of the name using this action. So we'll just have to set up some dynamically choosing of the name. In their example, it has the date in which it's added to SharePoint. So we can just set up these inputs to look for it based off of the name. Anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and find our document and connect it here. And so here I've gone ahead and connected it to our SharePoint document, our weekly sales insights Excel kind of shows you the file structure in which this is in. And then we've actually gone ahead and selected the table in which the data is inside of this Excel. And so one important note is you'll notice that the information inside of my Excel is within a table, right? It has these banded rows, it has this header. If your information is not within a table, a little bit of a caveat is you're gonna have to use a little bit of a different tool or a different way to work around that, but we'll cover more on that at the end of this video if that is your scenario. The rest of this still applies. You just might have to use a different action to ultimately get there. But nonetheless, this is gonna pull back the content of our table in JSON. This is gonna pull it back in an array where it's gonna have all of the columns and all of the information. And if your Excel file is pretty large, this could be quite a lot of information. Well, at this point in time in Copilot Studio, we are not able to leverage or pass back and forth JSON. We can pass back and forth or reason over strings with prompts, but we cannot do that with JSON, again, at this point in time, at least at the time of recording. So what we need to go ahead and do, I'm gonna throw a compose action in here and essentially just turn that into a string. So what this is gonna do is it's gonna effectively dump this huge chunk of JSON into a string. And now to us, reading that string would be pretty hard. It might not actually make that much sense. But thankfully, large language models can actually still, and in my experience, reason over this information fairly well. So how are we actually going to do this now? Well, the tool we're gonna use is we are not going to be passing back this string of our Excel here. And the reason for that is this. If we go ahead and look at some of the limitations of passing information back and forth between agent flows to Copilot, you are only able to pass back 1 megabyte of data from a flow to an agent. And so I recognize that in most scenarios, your string of Excel information, if you have a fair amount of information in that Excel, will exceed that 1 megabyte of information or of data size. And so we're not actually gonna be passing that back. If you're confident that no matter what, it's always gonna be less than that, sure, go ahead and do that and then set up the prompts and the other tools inside of your agent. But in our scenario, we are expecting that to be more than 1 megabyte. And so what we are actually gonna do is we're gonna be running this prompt inside of our agent flow, okay? And so inside of our agent flow, we're gonna set up a prompt that's gonna take this input as well as our instructions that we gave it from the agent, and it's gonna spit out based off of that information what we asked for based off of the instructions. So we could say who were the top 5 salesmen or sales team members, what accounts should we watch out for potential upsells, which accounts are new customers, and which accounts closed in the fastest time, or which sales team members took the longest amount of days to close a lead or an opportunity. Like, those are all different things that we could try to reason over this information with inside of this prompt. And then the prompt's output is what we're actually going to pass back to the agent, because that is going to be much less, because we're not going to be asking for all of the information inside of that Excel file. Let's go ahead and create our prompt. And go ahead and click on that and click New Custom Prompt. And it's gonna open up this screen here. And if you haven't necessarily created prompts before, it's fairly simple. Really what this is, think of this as like your own little AI agent, all right? It's your own little, hey, here are your inputs, here are your instructions, and it's gonna reason over it using the large language model and spit out an output. So let's go ahead and craft up some instructions. So I've gone ahead and skipped the boring part and have started to write out a lot of this content, but I want you to do something very similar or follow a very similar structure. Okay, so in this instance, we're gonna have 2 inputs. We're gonna have the string, or effectively our JSON that's now in a string, and then we're gonna be passing in some instructions or how we want it to actually analyze or reason over that data. I've gone ahead and put a place here where I'm saying, here is a JSON array of a table from Excel. And what I wanna go ahead and do is hit add content and text. And we're gonna call this JSON. We can provide some sample data here in a second that we're gonna come back to. Then I proceed to explain what this table contains. It's containing opportunities that our sales team had won within the last week, and these are deals that are closed. But then I think the really important part that you need to include in your instructions is just a lot of context around what each column in your table means, right? So again, if we look at our Excel, we have account name, account ID, opportunity ID, etc. I go ahead and outline what each one of these are. This is the name of the customer, the unique ID of the customer, the opportunity. And then something I want to call out as well is like we have a sales notes column. I want to say that this right here, this could potentially provide insights into why certain opportunities are won or lost, or why estimated revenue was different than actual revenue. And the reason why I'm doing that is because when we pass in instructions, it needs to know how all these columns relate to each other. What does this number mean compared to this text, compared to this number? Like, how are all of these things related to each other? How could I provide some sort of insights? I'm adding all of that into the context here as far as what the information inside of this table means. Then we're going to have, here are the following instructions I want you to execute to provide insights over the provided Excel table. We're going to add another input, and we're going to call this one instructions. And then I just have some general context. Hey, provide your output in a bulleted list if that is reasonable. And then this is always important to make sure you include. If you're unable to draw confident conclusions, make sure to disclose that you are not confident and encourage the reader to conduct further analysis on their own. So here our Excel analyst prompt is done. Let me go ahead and save this. And if you'll notice when you save that, any inputs that you added to your prompt, it's going to add them here. And so what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to add that string, the output of our compose, which again is the string of the JSON from the table in the Excel. And then we're going to add our instructions, which in our instance is a part of the trigger. Right here. We have our instructions input, which we're going to pass from our agent. Then we're going to come down here to the response. We're going to go ahead and say the output or the response back to our agent is not the body, but actually the text. This is going to be the text output from our prompt. If you do one of those other ones, let me actually click in there. The finish reason is like if it finished successfully or not. The body is going to contain all of this extra information. We are looking for just the text output from the prompt. We are looking for just the text. So at this point, our agent flow is done. Let me go ahead and save and publish this. If I go back now to our agent, here is that flow. Now, if you'll notice, I'm not necessarily creating a topic or adding this agent flow inside of a topic because this agent really only serves one purpose, and it's to reason over that Excel data. So pretty much every time there's a conversation happening, I want to be calling this tool. I don't want to call it only within a specific topic or a certain time during a conversation. I kind of want to be able to call it whenever I want. And so this is why I'm adding it here as opposed to inside of a topic. But that's really important that you add an accurate description because that's going to tell the agent when it should call this agent flow. When in the conversation should tell me, hey, you might want to use this flow. So it's really important that we write a description. I would think something like this should be effective. We're saying, hey, use this agent flow when you need to reason over the weekly sales insights or recently won opportunities from the last week. And here it's an Excel document that's updated every week in SharePoint. And the reason I'm saying that is because I'm thinking if I'm having a conversation and I'm like, hey, tell me about the insights, tell me about the highest sales team members from the Excel this last week. It might not necessarily know what I'm talking about, right? But if I say, give me some, the highest earning sales team members based off of the weekly sales report, it's going to understand that because I've included weekly sales insights in my instructions, as well as won opportunities or recently won opportunities or opportunities from the last week. Like I'm thinking about what are the things that somebody could say in the chat that should tell this agent to use this flow. As well as one additional property you need to make sure is turned on in this instance is this. When this tool may be used, you're going to want to make sure in my use case that the agent may use this tool at any time. If you only want to limit a certain tool to be able to be used during a specific time in the conversation inside of a topic, you're going to want to use this. And I will say, if you have further questions that you don't feel like I'm necessarily answering for your use case, be sure to click on the first link down in the description down below. That is a way how you can get in direct contact with me, book a call on my calendar so that we can meet and help you get this figured out. That's actually exactly how I came up to this use case and what we were talking about here. So now that my tool is set up, let me go ahead and save this. So now, as always, it's really important that we test our agent, and this is going to be where everything really starts to come together. So I keep using the example about finding the top 3 agents from this last week. Let's go ahead and say that, or top 3 sales team members. And so we can see as I send that message over here in the map as it's showing us, it's it's saying, hey, it's triggering the get insights from Excel. It extracted what the instructions were based off of my message. I mean, you saw everything I did there. I did not add any extra descriptions to instructions. It just naturally understood, hey, here's what the instructions are. It then ran the flow, took the JSON into a string, put that in the prompt, and spit out this and returned this back to me saying, hey, Jordan, Alex, and Taylor were the top 3. They each sold 5 opportunities, and here were those revenues. But let me say who sold the most number of products. So if you remember, inside of our data, we have another field called number of products related to each opportunity. And we can see that Jordan sold the most products last week with a total of 300 products. Looks like something, I'll just call this out, looks like something funny is happening with kind of the citations. You know, I could play around with that and everything there as I continue to iterate on this. Now let me say who took the longest to close deals. You know, so another thing, and it just extracted the instructions. Who took the longest time to close deals last week, including the duration and relevant details. All right. Here it pulls out, hey, Alex actually took the longest time to close deals this week with a duration of 21 days. But then it also says Chris also closed a deal in 21 days for this person. But Alex is highlighted as one of the members with the longest closing time generally. So at this point, it is reading this Excel information, reasoning over it based off of the instructions I'm requesting at that point in time, and spitting it out. So like I said, if you have any questions whatsoever or don't feel like I answered yours, be sure to click that first link down in the description down below. Thank you so much for sticking that in the video. I hope you found it insightful. My name is Griffin Lickfelt. I'm excited to connect with you in the next one.